Right. We are really getting started now. So, thank you all for being here today. We are going to continue on with our reflection on our wider community by hearing from Chris. And to introduce her is Barbara. So, thank you, Barbara.
Thanks for coming. Well, a long, long time ago, I went to visit Lago Nave. I had spent some years on Haiti back in the 60s. I had never been to this island, this remote place out in the Bay of Haiti. And there we arrived, and there was this most incredible person teaching school in roughly a one room classroom or so that saw all the visions that education would have both for the people in the community where she was and for all of Haiti. Well, one thing led to another, and eventually we ended up establishing Friends of Matènwa. Chris is the leader of Friends of Matènwa, spends part of every year in her home in Matènwa, and has a very exciting story to share with you about the school and about the community. Chris.
And we wouldn't have this nonprofit without Barbara. Let's just know that. Because I knew nothing about starting a nonprofit, but we needed to get more money as more classes were being put on the kindergarten to second grade, and then a high school. Okay, so I am going to start here. So it's called L'École Communauté Matènwa. This is in the mountains on the island of Lago Nave. And to picture this place, I'm going to show you a video. But first, I am going to show you the man who is the co-founder. This is Abner Sauvert. And I met him originally because I went to volunteer for a year in 1995. And he was the coordinator of adult literacy. But as we walked to each one of these centers every day, we started to talk education, and he actually also taught some elementary school. So the moment that changed my life from teaching in Cambridge to teaching in Matènwa permanently was that he said, "Could you give us some advice? Come into my first grade." So I went. But first I was like, there's a school in Matènwa? Like, where? Because I've been walking through here for 6 months. And he was like, no, down the hill over there, right? And I saw this, like, abandoned house that had 3 rooms. I was like, people actually go in there? So we went in, dirt floor, 25 kids in front of me, lined up like this. And I said, okay, get out your pencils. Let me see what you can do. And half of them ran out of the room. And I said, oh my goodness, is my Creole so bad? What did I say? And he said to me, no, they're doing exactly what you asked. They're getting the pencil from their brother or sister in the other room. So at that moment, or that night, I thought about it, and I thought, you know what? Those kids in Cambridge are going to be fine. But who's going to be here to help these kids? Who's going to apply to this job? I know 100 will be applying to Cambridge, right? But nobody's coming here. So that's why I stayed. I said, if I stay here, the resources will come. So that's where my life changed. Because of this man who was always talking education, and he kind of had this vision. I need a different kind of school. We're learning in French, yet in adult literacy, we're teaching in Creole. We're not allowed to hit the adults, but we're hitting the kids, right? That was one major rule, because that's what people knew, like hit them so that they will learn better when they have a wrong answer. So all of that was kind of, we were discussing that every day. And gradually, I remember we were on his porch one day, and he's gone like this. And he goes, I used to hit kids that were bigger than me, taller than me. How humiliating that was probably for them. But he didn't know before that. He said, I was doing what you're supposed to do. So that was lots of moments like that in Matènwa. So this is the way it looks today. This is a second grade student. Hopefully we'll be able to hear it. Okay.
Chaque matin, je fais salutation.
I should have prefaced that with the way it usually is in most schools. You go into a school, there's nothing on the walls. It's pretty cramped. Probably the size of the room is a quarter of this room, and there's 40 kids in there. You have to pay for your own books, so most of the kids don't even have books. And so they have a notebook, and you see a teacher up at the board. It's hard to imagine. Imagine a first grade classroom where somebody's writing in cursive in French, a language you don't know, and then making you try to copy it into your book and memorize those words, even though you don't know what they mean. But you better memorize them, because the next day if they call on you and you don't get it right, then you're getting hit. So it stems from slavery, right? It's just, again, the repeat of this colonization of, okay, we need to hit you so they don't kill you. Behave, do what you're supposed to do. Don't ask questions. So it's very much was like that. And this school is very now different. And let's see if I can actually get us to move on to the next slide. Sorry. Let's see. Okay. All right. So people say, well, how did this happen? Because Haiti is known as the graveyard of projects. A lot of projects happen, nothing happens. A lot of teacher training, nothing happens. And so the first piece was what's called open space. And this is a very different way of attacking a problem. You ask people to come under a certain theme. In this case, what kind of development do you want in your community? And each person, if they have something they really want to say, writes it up on the board here, tacks it into a time in the schedule, and people sign up so that only the people who are passionate about that question are going to be there. Nobody's, having to listen to something else. So that was the first start. And very, odd for them that people are even asking their opinion, right? As we know. So the other piece that I think helped was this thing called Children's Rights Education is a Conversation and reflection circles. So this woman, Kathy Cash, came up with this methodology where she had people interviewed. She didn't speak Creole. She had people interviewed in Creole, and then it was translated to her. And she made these books, one on physical abuse, one on sexual abuse, one on verbal abuse, one on when you're arguing, and a last one on good parenting. And these were short stories illustrated by Haitians that would just sort of stop in the middle of the story, and then they would say, okay, who's going to be that character and that character and that? What are you going to say to your neighbor when you see him beating his kid? So in that way, I think, we had lots of these school circles in the community all at once, and I felt like, you know what, it's not just about children's rights, it's healing them, because I heard them say things like, oh, you see how in that picture that woman's hitting that kid with a cooking pot. I remember when that happened to me. So this total healing and discussion, realizing that, no, this is not okay, was coming about. So the other piece, community buy-in. I had some money. I had worked in Cambridge for about 10 years. And I said, okay, I could buy a new motorcycle with this, or we could do something for the community. Are any of you interested in making a school? And they said, yes, we need a school here. People spend half their salaries, if not 3/4, on just sending their kid to school. And so they started to bring rocks to the site. We looked for a place. We bought a little piece of land. Back then, it was only $600. Small plot. We added onto it since, and it's much more expensive because we built this school. The other thing about Haitian education is that it humiliates what feeds it, which is most of the agricultural section. So you would hear a teacher say something like, study harder. Do you want to be like your parents and dig out potatoes? And I'm thinking, yeah, potatoes is what's paying your salary, right? But anyway, so we do this gardening, one, because climate change and that kids need to know how to grow vegetables because they're coming from the mainland, like we said, and to not belittle where they live, who they are. So we're doing the active learning, the constructive teaching, the real-world application, so that education makes sense and is pertinent to them for once. We're not teaching them all about, French history in French. So here's a little video about what you might see in the garden, where they're also doing math and science. Okay, and let's see if it will let me go to the next slide. Sorry. This is the piece I'm not. So since we talked about food this morning, we didn't have a breakfast program at first, but about 20 years ago, what's happening now is very similar that was happening back then. The president was being ousted, and the boats stopped coming to Lagonave. And this experience is that half the kids stopped coming to school because they were hungry. They couldn't walk an hour, they didn't want to come. And those who did show up were falling asleep by 10 o'clock. So not much learning was going on there. And it was extreme where I remember this parent coming to the kindergarten classroom. It was a Monday morning. She had a little piece of candy. And she said, "Can I give this to my kid? She didn't eat anything this weekend." So, of course you can. And that's when we started the breakfast program. We thought, this is going to be pretty expensive because we're going to buy locally. We're not going to bring the rice from Miami that people are handing out. And this will help the market women as well. So that's how that started 20 years ago. The other piece was, if we were going to teach in the mother tongue, what are they going to read? Because there's nothing written in it, hardly. So we started to write our own books. So you can see the little girl writing about this pig that looks more like a cow, but and they would illustrate them and then present them to the rest of the school every week at morning whole class meeting. And then we started to get bigger ideas. Why not libraries in all the schools, not just our school? And we looked for money to start printing them. And how would they be accepted by the majority of schools, since everybody believes in French? So we translated them into French and English, 2 target languages in high school. And this is the kids making the books. Here's an example.
Liv pi bon pou chak ti moun apren nan liv pa yo. Parce si nou chak apren nan liv pa nou, nou tap avanse pi rapide. Men lò vin avèk fransè a, même professeur parfois le gêne dans dictionnaire pour le cours. Mais langue maternelle nous connaît bien, c'est facile pour tout le monde apprendre.
Quand je me sens mal à l'aise, c'est les moi faire un livre pour comme et puis les gens ont appelé, là dit oh c'est Kevin qui t'a fait livre ça, me sens mal à l'aise.
Ça me plus remet dans le livre nous fait ensemble c'est yo que des gars ou
me sens fier parce que les élèves yo bon moi titre livre. Premier bagage titre la sorti na yo même et puis yo même encore bon phrase pour yo capable écrire livre ça. Ça facilite pour yo li plus rapide et comme ça tout pour yo apprendre. Et puis ça suscite yo venir grand écrivain dans la vie.
Okay. So the Ministry of Education does say that you should have art, you should have library, you should have phys ed and music, but nobody does, right? Who could afford all those teachers? Some schools you go into, the teachers teaching 2 or 3 classes, running from one room to the other. So we have computers, woodworking, all these essential things. And then parents need to pay a little bit of money, so they're invested. And so we started to think about, well, what could they do in terms of work? So we do have Art Matènwa, where they make various pieces of art, which you can go to the website, artmatenwa.org, if you want. Oh, and there we go. Susan has one of the scarves, paint on silk. A friend of mine from Cape, Ellen LeBeau, and I taught them how to paint on silk. Here's some of our success statistics. Most people in 2nd, 3rd grade, we were testing in other schools, and they could read 0 words per minute. So we're really, our dream is to be pushing this out to all the schools. So that's more statistics. So we have lots of teachers who actually, schools on Lago Nav now, it's 230 schools. We've been in at least 100 of them. And other schools are always like, when is it my turn? When is it my turn? It's like, well, I don't have any more money, okay? So it's sort of 20 at a time. And, but we have had schools from all these different areas of the mainland come to Lago Nav and be trained, which is very inspiring and hopeful for us. And it's very interesting because, you get people saying, okay, I have to admit that when they said they're sending me to Lago Nav, I thought, what am I going to learn in Lago Nav? But I've also heard teachers say, this is teaching? I haven't been teaching. And they say, you really don't hit the kids. They have so much patience. They're very surprised. So seeing is believing, right? I mean, all this teacher training happens, but then nothing changes because they haven't seen it. These are their peers doing it, right? And in Jacmel, an organization started sending their teachers, and she was like, I've been coming here every 3 months to do teacher training, and then as soon as I leave, I come back, it's back to the way it was. He said, but now it's sticking. What I tell them is sticking. And I said, because they've seen it now. I'm going to tell you about, since we have to tell you what our needs are, we put in this solar pump. It used to be a hand pump. And we have the solar panels there, and it filled up a 7,000-gallon tank up at the school. It was a great project. But unfortunately, and we had 2 kiosks, so you see 6 places that they could get water, and the community didn't have to go down into the ravine anymore. But this pump recently broke, and so they have to take this route down into the ravine, and you can see where the water is coming out here. So now it's taking probably 2 or 3 hours to get your water, because it's not just our community, but the surrounding communities all coming to here. And the sad story I heard was that people are weaker from not eating so much, and they're falling. So you might get a bucket of water, you're carrying it on your head, and then you fall. So that means another 2 or 3 hours, because you got to go back down again to bring it up. So this is why I showed you this one. I made it. Just to give you an idea, they just wrote a proposal saying it would cost about $6,500 to get a new pump, get it put in, get it transported from the mainland into Lago Nave. So I hope you will consider that. And the other thing is I've put my iPad over there because I put our website there. If you wanted to sign up to be a Breakfast Club member, you could do it there. I'll show you. Because people give, and it's really great that they give, but I keep saying, could you give a little every month? Because kids need to eat more than once. So that's my story. If you have any questions, I'm welcoming you to ask questions. Thanks.
Where do you get the teachers?
The teachers are local. I've trained them.
Does the state pay for, or whatever you call it, the country pay teachers in their school?
No, they don't. And there's, at one point, I think we're well known enough that they would have, and Abner said, no, you do that, and then they don't have to do anything, because now they're the state. So he was really like, I don't suggest that you ask them to pay for the teachers.
Do you have any examples of kids that have gone through your program and now are adults, and what impact this has had on them? Either examples or even statistics on that?
What I will say is that we have several teachers that used to be our students. One of them runs the computer room now. He did go to college for technology in Port-au-Prince before it got too dangerous. His brother, on the other hand, is back in Matènwa helping us, but it got too dangerous, so he came back before he graduated. Our administrator, a new administrator this year, she had graduated from college, and now she's our administrator. And we have several. The music teacher, one of the art teachers. But some people, some of our students are in the US now, but because they went through Mexico. Some others are in Chile, because Chile opened their doors several years ago because they needed workers. So they went that way. And you'll find that some of these Haitian people who are here now, that have just immigrated, that are in these shelters, they speak Spanish because they came from Chile. But some horror stories, too, about going through that jungle. It's kind of horrifying to hear them. One of our directors, his brother, he was telling me, oh, my brother was in Chile. I don't know why he moved. He had a job, but they tried to go through that, and they all died. Him, his wife, and 2 kids, because the wife fell in the river, so the husband jumped in, and then the kids are like, look, my parents are leaving, and they jumped in. And yeah, it's hard. Any other questions?
Add to that one. One of the things that has made, I think, a huge difference there for the way the community works, because people have had some education, because they have talked about the expectation of us each to one another. There's a lot less violence in the community, and there's a lot more feeling of a capacity. Haiti has a phrase which always drove me crazy, which was, if God wishes. If anything happened that was good, well, it's because if God wishes. And if something didn't happen that was no good, then, well, if God wishes. And through education, through talking about problem solving toward addressing issues, what cholera or other things that were going to come, as the leaders of this community brought people together and explained what was happening and why it was happening, people feel more enabled. They feel more in control of their lives. They don't have a whole lot of control, but they do have some. And that has meant there's a lot less violence in the school. There's some planning for the future. There's some expectation that as you become an adult, you may have some choices. And you feel that in the community. You feel that in the family structure. And as the kids become teenagers, you can tell that they're thinking about their future in a way that is not of a similar grinding message of, okay, now I'm the head of the family, so I have to figure out how to survive. There's definitely a sense of more ability in Matènwa than in many other rural communities.
I'm glad you said that, because I'm thinking that when I was showing you about open space and people being in groups and making their own decisions, and then they would write a proposal and we would fund it, right? This is very unlikely. Most times money, you've heard, coming into Haiti, most of it's in the belt around Washington, D.C., is where it ends up. They're outsourcing everything. So it was very empowering, like, oh, we said we needed an art center. They're going to fund it. They've, there's lots of artists now that weren't there before or weren't trained before. That's one example. And the other thing, I'll tell you one last story, because these stories come up and I think, oh, you'll like this story. The first year we were there, there were families that had kids in other schools, and then they had one kid in our school. And we were known as the Creole school with no discipline, because we didn't hit the kids, and we weren't speaking French. We were teaching French as a second language. And but what ended up happening was, in their own homes, they saw that their kids were learning to read who were in our school, and their other kids still couldn't read. And not only that, but they started to teach their parents how to read, and their siblings. And so then everybody started going, no, we want to put all our kids in your school. The last story I'll tell you, because I don't want to, I could talk for days, is last year we needed a new solar system. It was February of last year. Things were dangerous. I was like, no, you can't do this. And they said, yes, we can. We need the electricity. We're going to go to Port-au-Prince. We're going to buy the panels. We're going to buy all the pieces, the batteries. We got through, a couple months ago with all this books and notebooks. It will be okay, because the gang member opened the truck. They're not interested in notebooks. We're just going to put notebooks on top of everything. So there they are, Saturday morning, and I get a call around 6:30, and they say, so we're tracking them on the phone, and they haven't moved in an hour. Oh, man. The next hour, they go, they're definitely kidnapped. So then, sure enough, they were kidnapped. And the story, I want to tell you about the story of Andy, one of our bookstore manager, right? So he was one of the people there. And he told the story of how when they had them get out of the truck, that the person took off his mask and he thought, I'm dead. I see this person's face. And as the hours went on, they weren't asking for telephone numbers of their family. And he basically was like, and they were shoving rum down his throat. You know, he doesn't drink, but they were, you know, drink this, drink this. And he also was saying, you know, I heard that sometimes they rape you too. And he was like, I'd rather have them kill me than let them do that, you know. But evening came, and like a miracle, oh, I forgot to tell you that when they put them in the room, there was 24 other people in there already. But somehow, they let them go. They said, here's our phone number. Whoever owns what's in that truck, we'll negotiate. And they let them go because, you know, they were smart enough to wear sandals and old clothes and act like they were workers on the truck as opposed to the owners of the items. So, of course, after they actually opened the truck and saw what was in it, we lost it all. Luckily, they actually did do it again recently, and we have our whole system up since last month. So I'm happy about that. But Andy, young guy, family saying, you need to be part of the Biden program. We're going to send you to the States. And he said, no, I'm not going anywhere. He couldn't talk for 3 days. He couldn't sleep for 3 months because all he saw was that every time he shut his eyes. But he said, you know what? How can I do this to my community? We're doing something here. And I'm staying. Thanks.